Have you ever left a meeting feeling incredibly energized? You know you made the right decision. You assigned the right action. Everyone was excited about moving forward. And then 2 weeks later, nothing happens. If you're a leader, I'm sure at some point, hopefully not a lot of points, but I'm sure at some point that's happened to you. Most missed goals are not due to laziness. Most missed goals are really a follow-up and accountability failure. A plan without accountability is like a gym membership you never use. Lots of potential, but zero results. And having the right accountability, the right follow-up, could be the difference between frustration and freedom as an individual, as a company, as a team. Now, we're going to talk about accountability here, and leaders tend to hate this topic because they find it so difficult. The biggest complaint I get all the time from CEOs and senior leaders is, what do I need to do to hold my people accountable? Do I just need to fire everybody if they don't do what they commit to do? It's like this secret that they've yet to uncover. How do I hold people accountable? So leaders hate the topic because it seems to be difficult to figure out, and also because accountability has this negative connotation. It's just the hammer we hit people with when they don't do their jobs. So leaders hate this topic, but I love this topic because there are so many good answers to that question. It's not a difficult one to execute on if you just shine the light on some of the right behaviors. And that's what we're going to talk about today. But first, I want to talk about why accountability tends to break down. And it's a few reasons. The one biggest reason, I think, is a lack of clarity around what we're holding people accountable for. A lack of clarity, first, believe it or not, around what accountability or when you say someone is accountable for something, what does that even mean? And how is it different than responsibility? So one area of lack of clarity is just, what does the word mean? The other is a lack of clarity around specific expectations. Telling someone who's accountable for marketing, we need more leads. We need more marketing qualified leads. That's not clear enough. Very often, that's even clearer than we typically are. We don't even know it's marketing qualified leads. We just say we need to do a better job of marketing. What does that mean? We're not clear about our expectations. So part of it's lack of clarity, and we're going to dive into that. But it's also a lack of a rhythm. There's no process or rhythm for follow-up. Leaders swing from babysitting and micromanaging to giving people so much rope that, they're never held accountable. And they swing back and forth between detailed follow-up and no follow-up, and it confuses everyone. They're not sure what to expect from you as their leader. The other reason for a lack of accountability is leaders who don't model accountability. I remember a client I had, many years ago, about 10 or 11 years ago, was consistently complaining about his team, that they weren't doing what they committed to. They weren't being accountable. But the main reason they weren't being accountable is that he wasn't being accountable. There were some major things he was supposed to do that he didn't do. So he was modeling for them exactly what they were giving back to him. The bottom line is, you get as a leader two things. You get what you tolerate, and you get what you model. going to say that again. You get what you tolerate, and you get what you model. So we're going to dive in to 11 ways, that's right, 11 ways to increase accountability. Now, I know 11 is overwhelming, so you may not implement all 11, or my guess is you've already implemented a few of these, but I want to give you 11 ways. Pick a few. Pick one that you're not doing and implement it. But don't get overwhelmed. I'm going to give you 11. And we're going to start, before I even get into the 11, we're going to start with a definition of what accountability means. And more specifically, there are two words that are used interchangeably. And I've talked about this on other podcasts. We're going to talk about it again. There are two words that are used interchangeably, and those words are accountability and responsibility. And using them interchangeably without clear definitions causes mass confusion within the organization and mass frustration for the leader who believes people are not being accountable, but it's because you're not clear on what it means. So let me give you the definition I use, the definition my clients use. I don't care what it says on dictionary.com or wherever we're looking up words these days. I'm going to give you a definition that works for me. More importantly, it works for my clients. Responsibility is who is rolling up their sleeves to get a job done. That could be one person. That could be 1,000 people. If you have a leadership team working for you, in my definition of responsibility, it might be fair, would be fair, for you to say to your team, we are all responsible for giving our clients wow levels of service. Because at some level, directly or indirectly, they are all rolling up their sleeves to make sure the end result is your client gets a level of service that wows them. So responsibility could be one person, could be 1,000 people. It's who's rolling up their sleeves to get the job done. Accountability is always and only one person. One person who owns that function or that project or that priority or that task. And what I mean by own it, and if we go back to the example of creating wow levels of service, while 500 people might be responsible for giving clients wow levels of service, you, as our VP of Client Experience, congrats on your demotion or promotion, I'm not sure, but you as our VP of Client Experience are accountable for giving our clients wow levels of service. That means you own defining what wow levels of service means. You own the strategy to get there, the way we're going to measure whether we're getting there, the plan and how the rest of the team could help. If you are in the green, you're going to get a big pat on the back for wowing our clients. If you're in the red or the yellow, as a leadership team, we're going to look to you to say, what's the plan and how could we help? So accountability is always one and only one person that owns whatever that task, project, priority, function is. That being said, let's start with 11 ways to improve accountability. And the first 5 are actually just different types of accountability that you want to make sure you're defining. So method number 1 to improve your level of accountability is to make sure you have crystal clear KPI accountability. That everyone on the team, including you, even if you are the CEO, the owner, the founder, everyone on the team needs crystal clear KPI, key performance indicator, responsibility. Other ways to say that is everyone needs clear measures of success for their role within the company. Everyone needs measurable outcomes. Telling your head of marketing that sales needs more leads, we need you to bring in more leads, is not crystal clear KPI accountability. Crystal clear KPI accountability is saying we need to see at least 15 new marketing qualified leads every week. Now, KPI accountability doesn't mean that everyone on your team should have 28 different KPIs they're coming to you with and being held accountable for. That's a whole lot of information with zero knowledge and zero actionability. And I'll keep using marketing as an example. If you're the head of marketing or the head of marketing is someone that works for you, that head of marketing may have 28 different ways she is measuring how marketing is going. That may be the case. But that head of marketing should be held accountable for 1 or 2 or 3 most important measures of success. Some of them may be lagging KPIs, which are measures of results. Anything on your profit and loss statement is a lagging KPI, a measure of a result. For marketing, a marketing qualified lead is a lagging measure, the measure of a result. For whoever owns sales, new revenue per month is a lagging indicator, a lagging KPI. For sales, a leading KPI, or for anyone, a leading KPI is the measure of an activity that drives a result. So for sales, it may be the number of sales meetings with key decision makers per week, some specific number that they're being held accountable for. So we need KPI accountability. Not 28 KPIs, but 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 at the most. And ideally, it's some combination of both lagging and leading KPIs. I have another podcast all about how not to screw up KPIs if you want to dig deeper into KPIs. So number 1 is KPI accountability. Number 2 is behavioral accountability. And this has to do with culture and core values. It's not enough that someone is being held accountable for specific measurable outcomes, measures of success, measures of productivity. But they need to be held accountable for being a strong culture fit. And more specifically, being held accountable for some number, 3 to 6 ideally, of non-negotiable behaviors that I call core values. We need to hold people accountable. If people are knocking their KPIs out of the park, but they are not consistently living your non-negotiable core values, they are toxic to the organization. So we need to be specific about those core values, specific about the behaviors. I had one client in the renewable energy business who, when I first started working with them, they had a core value of sustainability. Now, while that sounds nice and it looks good on a website, especially if you're in the renewable energy business, what the hell does that mean as a behavior? Were they going and checking everyone's home to make sure they were recycling? Your core values need to be non-negotiable behaviors. And if someone is not living those behaviors, they need to be held to account for not living those behaviors. So, number 1 technique, method to improve accountability is to have crystal clear KPI accountability. Number 2 is to have crystal clear behavior accountability, core values accountability, culture fit accountability, call it what you want, but it's about behaviors. Number 3 is you need clear functional accountability. I alluded to that before when I talked about what the head of client experience may be accountable for, or sales or marketing. For each function within your organization, head of company is a function. Sales, marketing, finance, innovation, technology, human resources, etc., operations. Each one of those functions should have one and only one person accountable. Crystal clear accountability. And by the way, if you're a CEO and you have 3 people accountable, quote unquote accountable for sales, remember the rule is one and only one person accountable. So if you believe you have 3 people accountable for sales, surprise, you are actually accountable, because you got to play referee between those 3 people. You have to make sure there are standards of sales and follow-up and measuring your pipeline across those 3 people. So we need functional accountability. Do you have clarity around who that one person is accountable for marketing, for finance, for sales? Now that one goes together really well. The idea of functional accountability goes together really well with the first technique of having KPI accountability. Now KPIs, you want to have KPI accountability up and down the organization, from the CEO to the accounts payable clerk. They ought to know what measurable outcomes they're accountable for. But specific to functional accountability, you can have functional accountability, but if you don't know how you're measuring the success of marketing or technology or human resources or finance, then saying someone's accountable for finance without having KPI accountability, you still don't have clarity there. So those two go together real nicely. So number 1 was KPI accountability. Number 2, behavioral accountability. Number 3, functional accountability. Number 4 is project or priority accountability. And I'll use an example that's a very common one. Let's say you have got a project to implement a new CRM system. In my over 35 years in consulting and coaching, I have seen this same conversation happen probably 50 times. A new CRM is supposed to go live. We're at the senior leadership team meeting. The head of technology says, "Hey everybody, I've got great news. Last week, on time and under budget, our new CRM system went live." And your head of technology expects that they're going to get this glorious standing ovation. And they hear silence. Until the head of operations says, "That's wonderful that the CRM went live. I was under the impression that part of the value was that as the head of operations, my team would be able to look at the sales pipeline and use that to plan and manage our inventory." Well, the sales pipeline is so inaccurate that I can't even use it. So who cares that the CRM went live? With that, the head of sales says, "Damn right, the pipeline is inaccurate. I told you 3 months ago that if my salespeople need to go through 17 screens and spend 3 hours to enter a new opportunity, that ain't happening. I'm not going to have them do that. My salespeople need to be out there selling, not sitting behind their laptop, spending 3 hours entering a new opportunity." Here's the problem. All those 3 people are right. The head of technology implemented the technology. The head of operations is not able to do anything better in their job because it's been implemented. The head of sales is right. Their salespeople need to be out there selling. The problem is one of accountability. We had 3 people, and probably more, 3 people responsible for implementing the CRM. We did not have one person accountable. If one person was accountable, not for implementing the technology, if one person was accountable for seeing the value, seeing the return on investment from that CRM, that leadership team would be having a much different conversation. Now, here's the problem. Let's say the head of sales is accountable for the successful implementation and the value resulting from the new CRM. I've had head of sales say, hey, Mike, how could you hold me accountable when I don't own the technology piece? And I don't own what they're doing in operations or customer service. And my answer is, welcome to the world of senior leadership. In senior leadership, we get to sit around the big boy or big girl table. We get paid the big bucks because sometimes we are held accountable for things we don't have authority over or we don't have total control over. As a senior leader, we are paid for results. And sometimes that means working with other teams like sales, working with technology or service or operations. We need one person accountable. That was number 4, project or priority accountability. Number 5 is task accountability. How many times have you been in a meeting where someone brings up a great idea and everybody says, that was a great idea, and then you move on to the next agenda item. And then 2 months later, you wonder why nothing happened. Well, with my clients, I use a very complex tool called a who, what, when. It's a very simple 3-column spreadsheet. When a task comes up in a meeting, you say, wait a minute. It sounds like we've got an action here. It sounds like we need to look into this whole net promoter system thing to better measure whether we're wowing our clients. Who's accountable for that? What are they doing? When are they going to have it done by? We need task accountability. And very often when I say, okay, it sounds like we've got a who, what, when, who's accountable for that? I will get answers like, oh, me and Joe will do it. Did I say that right? Is it me and Joe or Joe and I? Always get that screwed up. But me and Joe are going to do it. And my answer very nicely is thank you for telling me who's responsible. It's good to know that Joe and yourself, or you and Joe, again, my grammar's so bad. It's good to know that the 2 of you are working on this, but I need to know who the one person is accountable. Who is the one person that's going to be accountable? Because without that one person, frankly, we have high school cafeteria bullshit conversations around the senior leadership table. I sent Joe the questions for the Net Promoter Score survey, and he never got back to me. Well, I told you I was going to be on vacation, and I needed it the week before. It's like, really? Are we having that conversation? We need one person who owns it. That's number 5, task accountability. So those are the different types of accountability. There was KPI accountability, behavior accountability, functional accountability, project or priority accountability, and task accountability. Now I want to go into, that's the first 5. I want to go into a few of the ways to follow up, the specific meeting rhythm to help you follow up and actually set these accountabilities. And one is, and this is number 6 technique, is the quarterly planning session. With my clients, those are either 1 or 2 day planning sessions where we do a whole host of things and looking back at performance to date, looking forward, creating the next 90-day plan. What are our financial targets? What are our quarterly priorities, which we call rocks? We look at assessing the talent of the organization. We do a lot of things, but the most important thing we do before we leave that room in our quarterly plan is we say, what do we need to accomplish over the next 90 days typically KPIs and priorities. What do we need to accomplish over the next 90 days? Who's accountable and how are we measuring that? So 2 things happen in the quarterly planning meeting that are super important. Number 1 is we're holding people accountable to their quarterly priorities from the last quarter and to their KPIs that they own. And number 2, we are defining and assigning accountability for the next set of quarterly priorities or rocks and KPIs. So the quarterly planning meeting is critical to hold people accountable, but also define the new accountabilities. That's number 6. Number 7 is the weekly accountability meeting, which is a meeting of the senior leadership team. Notice I did not say the weekly status meeting. Shoot me if I have to sit through another status meeting where everybody just talks about what they did and what they didn't do and what they're going to do. And I don't have time for that. I've got real work to do. The weekly accountability meeting is one whose focus is holding each member of the leadership team accountable for all the things we just talked about, for their KPIs, for their projects, for their priorities, for their tasks. When you talk about KPIs or quarterly priorities or rocks, are they red, yellow, or green? We need to have specific measures and know whether they are green, successful, yellow, in some danger, red, failing. And what that allows us to do in a weekly accountability meeting is manage by exception. If you're in the green, I might say, hey, great news, you're in the green, on this KPI or on your KPIs or with the rocks that you own. Is there anything we need to talk about? But you look like you're in the green. No, I'm good. Great. Let's keep moving. So what we want to focus on in the weekly accountability meeting is KPIs or rocks or tasks where people are in the yellow or the red. And let's figure out what we need to do to get back in the green. In those weekly accountability meetings, I'm holding leaders accountable. If they're in the red or the yellow, they better come in with a plan, or at least a specific ask of the leadership team to help come up with a plan or execute the plan. And the big mistake I've seen in the weekly accountability meeting is the CEO will go around the room and just accept every excuse from everybody on the team. First person said, well, I didn't accomplish my rock. I'm not on target with my rock because, last week was, a big fire drill and this happened and this happened. The CEO says, yeah, I get it. And then next person goes and says, well, I've been so busy. I haven't had a chance to focus yet on this task, but I'll get to it next week. Yeah, I get it. I know you're real busy. It's like, wait a minute. Aren't these things these leaders committed to? They're not just things they hope to get done. They're things they committed to. So as the leader, as the facilitator of the weekly accountability meeting, you need to actually hold people accountable and don't accept excuses. Remember, you get what you tolerate. That was number 7. Number 8 is the weekly one-on-one meeting. So the accountability meeting is a meeting of your team. The weekly one-on-one meeting is a one-on-one meeting separately with each of your direct reports. I like to make those 30-minute meetings. And in the weekly one-on-one meeting, in my framework, actually every other one-on-one meeting is about accountability, because in my one-on-one meeting framework, there are 2 types of one-on-ones and you alternate weekly between the 2 types. The first is the accountability and feedback meeting. Obviously, that one's about accountability. So in the accountability and feedback meeting, if I'm the leader and you report to me, that's my agenda. And my purpose is coming in to that meeting, and I'm going to hold you accountable over and above what we may have talked about in the weekly accountability meeting, or maybe diving deeper on some things that I need to talk to you about that weren't appropriate for the team weekly accountability meeting, I'm going to hold you accountable to the tasks you committed, to the KPIs you're committed, to the rocks you're committed to. I'm also going to give you feedback. Feedback on where you're kicking butt and doing great. Feedback on where I see a problem, including feedback on those behavioral KPIs or culture fit or core values. So in the feedback and accountability meeting, that's what you're doing. Now, the other type of meeting, I said there's two types of meetings. The every other week one-on-one meeting, I call a coaching meeting. And that's not really about accountability. In a coaching meeting, if I'm the leader and you work for me, that's your agenda. And you're coming into that meeting with something you need help with. And I'm going to coach you through it. That's all I'll say there, because our focus here is not about coaching, it's about accountability. So number 8 is having the right weekly one-on-one meeting structure, including a feedback and accountability meeting. Number 9 is something called cascading communication. And I think I learned this from one of the Patrick Lencioni books. It may have been 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. But in these meetings, whether it's a quarterly meeting or a weekly meeting, or actually one of the things I didn't talk about is a monthly meeting, but quarterly meeting, annual, quarterly, monthly, weekly, one-on-one. One of the important things at the end of the meeting is to do something called cascading communication. And cascading communication is just a way to confirm the decisions that you made and the actions that you agreed to take from that meeting, as well as, the reason it's called cascading, as well as from what you talked about, what should be communicated down and out or up through the organization, and what needs to stay in that room. Where is it Vegas rules where, hey, let's make sure we agree what we talked about in this meeting does not go anywhere. That's between us. So it's really important at the end of the meeting for this cascading communication. Here are the decisions we made. Here's the accountabilities people took. Here's what we're communicating out. Here's what we're not communicating out. That's number 9. Number 10 of 11, so we're almost there. Number 10 is to have a planning tool to help you document all of these decisions and accountabilities and KPIs and tasks and priorities and projects. You need a planning tool. So you're not saying, let's go back and look at the old flip chart. Or do you have the notes from the meeting that we had? I happen to use something called Metronome Growth Systems that works really well, and it's really consistent with the coaching process I use with my clients, and allows us to put in our long-term vision, our 3-year initiatives, our annual priorities, our quarterly rocks, who's accountable, KPIs, who, what, whens. All of those things go into the tool so that when we have our weekly meetings, our monthly meetings, our quarterly meetings, our annual meetings, we actually know how we're doing. If you're keeping that tool up to date with your status, we know whether you're red, yellow, green on your KPIs or on your rocks, or whether you got a who, what, when done or not. So having a planning tool, a good planning tool, allows you to manage by exception. Now, some people do that by creating, elaborate, Google Sheet or Excel spreadsheets that they do it on. Those are okay. Those could work. But I really like the idea of having a good, solid planning tool. I use Metronome Growth Systems. It's not the only one, but it works for me. Lastly, number 11, and this is probably the most important one, and I mentioned it earlier. Number 11 technique to improve accountability is to model accountability yourself. If you want your team to be accountable, you need to model it. You need to set the standard. You need to honor your commitments. Own when you slip. Being accountable doesn't mean you always get done what you say you're going to get done, but it means you are taking accountability for it. It means if you're slipping, you're asking for help. If you've already slipped, you're owning where you slipped and again asking for help. You're admitting where you need help. You're admitting where you screwed up. And you're doing everything you can to do what you've committed to do. And you need to encourage your people to do the same. If you are not encouraging an open, honest environment where people could admit where they need help, you're going to have accountability problems. But you need to model that. So real quickly, that was 11. Number 1 was KPI accountability. Number 2 was behavioral accountability. Number 3 was functional accountability. Number 4 is project or priority accountability. Number 5, task accountability. Number 6 was make sure you're having a quarterly planning meeting. Number 7 is the weekly accountability meeting, not a weekly status meeting, a weekly accountability meeting. Number 8 is the weekly one-on-one meeting structure, and especially the feedback and accountability part of that structure. Number 9 was cascading communication. Number 10 was using a planning tool. Number 11 was modeling accountability. Try one of those. At the very least, pick one that maybe you're not executing on, or one where maybe you need to execute better on. Maybe it's starting with creating a who, what, when, because you don't have that. Maybe it's a better structure to your one-on-one meetings. Maybe it's stopping the idea of a weekly status meeting and turning it into a weekly accountability meeting. Do something. Do something, and I'd love for you to try it. Share your stories with me. My email is mike@mike-goldman.com. I'd love to hear what's working for you, what's not working for you. Now, this is not the only place that I've ever talked about accountability. Check out other podcast episodes where I talk about accountability, where I talk about KPIs, where I talk about core values, where I talk about the right planning and communication rhythm. There's bits and pieces of a lot of this in other podcasts. My books, Breakthrough Leadership Team. Go buy that book. It talks a lot about all of these things. My upcoming book, I say upcoming depending on when you're listening to this. My book, The Strength of Talent, How to Grow Your People to Grow Your Profit, is coming out the week of October 14th, 2025. So maybe that's already out there. Maybe it's not. If you want to pre-order it, if it's before then, go to strengthoftalent.com and pre-order it. Check out my Breakthrough Growth course. That's under resources on my website. There are a lot of different resources I have that will help you with accountability. I hope this was helpful. I always say if you want a great company, you need a great leadership team. I hope I got you a bit closer there today. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you soon.